Hello again. I guess I'm gonna have to talk fast because the I thought the unlimited screencastify was going to extend through June, but I'm being cut off after 5 minutes. But that's okay. I know some of you are very pleased by that, and that hurts my feelings deeply. Anyway, final lesson 10. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why the North won, how the North won, things like that. So one of the people to focus on is William Tecumseh Sherman. Sherman is well known for his March to the Sea, something called Total War. And while Ulysses S. Grant was having some victories, at least more victories in the North, William Tecumseh Sherman was cutting a swath right through the South. He captured Atlanta, Georgia, and then with his 60,000 men, he basically cut Georgia in half and ended up going all the way to Savannah. This was coupled with the election in 1864. So many people think that had William Tecumseh Sherman either not been successful when he was or not been successful at all, that perhaps Lincoln wouldn't have won re-election and people in the North would have decided, well, this war is unwinnable. But because of his victories and his dominance in the South, that helped lead Lincoln to re-election in 1864. Speaking of that election, George McClellan, who was a Union general, and we've talked about him many times, he he and Lincoln did not get along, and so when he was fired from the lead of the Army of the Potomac, he actually ended up running against Abraham Lincoln for the presidency as the opposition candidate. And he was really the anti war candidate. McClellan, who had been in charge of the military, ended up being somebody who was willing to end the war peacefully, if that meant that slavery continued or perhaps that the South was able to secede, we'll never know. He actually ended up, well, obviously he lost because there's no President McClellan. He ended up going overseas, living in Europe for a number of years, and ended up coming back and being the governor of New Jersey. But McClellan often had many not nice things to say about Abraham Lincoln in his private notes that he sent his wife, called him a baboon, a gorilla, an ape. I don't know why they're all primate centered, but anyway. Appomattox Courthouse, oftentimes I'll shorten it to Appomattox, but the full name of the town is actually Appomattox, and that is Appomattox Courthouse, and that is where Lee ended up surrendering to Ulysses S. Grant. Now, there were some other battles further away, but when Lee surrendered, many people consider that to be the end of the war. At that point, Richmond had been captured. Lee's men were on the run. They were hungry, they were tired, and they really had nowhere else to go. So that surrender happened between Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant in that painting you can see there. Jefferson Davis, what happened to him? Well, he left Richmond because the Union troops were approaching, and he ended up being captured in Georgia, attempting to. Many people think that he was attempting to flee to Mexico and sort of restart the Confederacy down there. He did spend a couple of years in jail, but ended up dying of old age. He wasn't executed or anything like that. And you can actually find his statue in the Capitol building, which I always thought was a little bit interesting that the person who was the president of a treasonous part of America actually has his statue there. But that's what the people of Mississippi sent to the Capitol building, and there it stands at least for the next few years. John Wilkes Booth. So, of course, you guys know that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Weird thing about John Wilkes Booth is that he was actually a very successful actor. He made in today's money, hundreds of thousands of dollars each year as an actor. Of course, being an actor was different. There was no Hollywood, there was no movies or things like that. But his family was a successful acting family. But he had long been an outspoken critic of President Lincoln, had sort of romanticized the South, and that led to him thinking that the assassination would be a good idea. Oh man, it's only got 20 seconds left. What I'm gonna have to break this up into two, I think. But anyway, I will be back for the third part. Oh my goodness, to talk about the assassination of President Lincoln, and then to also go over the consequences of the war.